Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tezenghausen. June 12th, here are the main news stories at this moment. Logistics have been cut off, the holiday season is ruined, and all that's left is to wait for a Ukrainian landing in Crimea. There is no longer any talk of prosperity or a decent life on the peninsula. If the war isn't stopped right now, Crimea faces not only a military, but also a humanitarian catastrophe. These aren't my words, these are the words of a Russian war correspondent Dmitry Steshin, who is predicting a military catastrophe for the Russian army, a special correspondent for Komsomolskaya Pravda, and essentially an agent of the Russian Federation's Ministry of Defense. In fact, he told those who are currently in Crimea to save themselves while they still can, before it's too late. And he's not the only one. There, a wave has somehow started synchronously among Russian propagandists, enough turning a blind eye to what's happening. They want, not Ukraine, but they themselves want, to launch an offensive on Crimea. Something needs to be done. Solovyov is over there handing out some kind of valuable advice. He says you just need to go and cut Ukraine off from the sea. And that's it. See, the most valuable advice from Solovyov? How come no one thought of this before? It's the kind of advice like, instead of sitting around with no money, you just need to become rich and successful. And that's it. Well, and in Crimea, apparently there's practically no gasoline left. By the way, today I came across a thread where someone asked, aren't you planning to get out of Crimea? With the fact that... And now there's thunder and a storm. I don't know if you can hear it. It's right above my head. So there's this thread where people are asking, aren't you planning to get out of Crimea? There are actually quite a few positive responses there. People are planning to leave and are already leaving Crimea. And this isn't even a crisis yet. It's just the beginning. Yesterday, people were asking in the comments about the strike in Sevastopol, what kind of strike it was, since hardly anyone wrote about it. So, to put it briefly, they mentioned that a Neptune missile hit Streletsskaya Bay in Sevastopol. We checked into it, including with the help of our partisans. There were 3 strikes in Sevastopol, but it was specifically a Neptune missile that hit Streletsskaya Bay. And by the way, our military confirmed that they destroyed storage sites for weapons and military equipment of the Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet. So, in Strelka, I know this area very well, Streletsskaya Bay. I used to walk through it to get to university, and my school was on the opposite side. In other words, I've explored that entire bay inside and out. A bit further on, there's the military academy, so-called Nakimka, and also the Department for Military Divers, but that's not where the strike hit. The 68th Separate Brigade of Water Area Protection Ships is based there. So there's information that they had hangars there where they kept maritime drones. In other words, these drones are made for patrolling and protecting the bays. Well, they just got unlucky. A Neptune missile hit and wiped out all those efforts. By the way, they closed off Streletsskaya Bay with a boom barrier. But a boom barrier doesn't protect against a Neptune missile. Well, today, 3 of the most important factories on the territory of the Russian Federation were hit. Magyar congratulated Russians and Putin on Russia Day. So which factories are we talking about? Taneco in Nizhnekamsk is one of the largest and most technologically advanced oil refining complexes in Russia. In other words, it's a gigantic plant. There, the primary processing unit was destroyed. So this entire gigantic factory city could simply come to a halt because there is no primary processing. This plant, in terms of capacity, can process 17 million tons of oil per year, which is 6.5% of all oil refining in Russia. Let's take a look at how it was burning today. Wonderful. It's burning in at least 3 places. Well then, and there as well in Nizhnekamsk, the Nizhnekamsk Neftekim petrochemical plant was attacked. Also a powerful processing chemical plant. Wonderful. And the third facility is a chemical giant. Tolyatti Kochuk in the Samara region, one of the largest producers of synthetic rubber in Russia. Both of these enterprises are chemical plants and oil refineries. They supply the Russian military-industrial complex with essential rubbers, polymers, and fuel. But this Tolyatti Kochuk plant has one very important feature. There is one very important characteristic. Tolyatti Kochuk, among other things, also produces additives for automotive gasoline, and this is the most important target here. Even if the refineries in the area are physically operating, without octane-boosting additives, they cannot produce AI 95 gasoline. That is, they can only produce straight-run naphtha with an octane rating of 50 or 70, at best, which is unsuitable for modern engines. It needs additives to turn it into the familiar gasoline. This strike on Tolyatti Kauchak is simply a more intellectually sophisticated blow and attack. Not to destroy the plant, but to effectively nullify even those plants in the area that are still operating. To break the chain of fuel quality. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, at least the concert on Red Square for Russia Day was cancelled, the fireworks too. Ukraine has already taken care of that for you. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. You can do it right now. It's important for promoting the channel. We're fighting Putin's propaganda. Let's do it together. Be sure to subscribe. And I came across something, a video from the Progress plant in Chelyabinsk where a Flamingo missile hit, one missile hit there. I specifically chose this video where the aftermath is clearly visible. So this is, seriously, first of all, I'll show you this video now. Pay attention to how the Russians covered the anti-drone defenses with new nets. They thought the buildings would be protected, not just with nets, but with some kind of rebar, grills, but it didn't help. And secondly, this video is very important. It shows that now, from a distance of 1,000 kilometers, a missile 10 meters long can arrive and literally destroy everything down to the first floor. Look at these consequences. It's very important for Russians, Muscovites, residents of St. Petersburg and other Russian cities to see this. Take a close look. Because last time, when our drones attacked this plant, I said that next time when missiles arrive, the employees might not have time to escape. And that's exactly what happened. They're still searching for employees there. Not everyone has been found yet. In other words, some people there were simply vaporized. Well, instructions from the local authorities and Russian security services. Keep silent about the casualties, don't show the consequences, God forbid, so that the employees of this plant and other military factories in Russia don't get scared and stop coming to work. But, I think that when Russians see footage like this, they need to realize that a strike on yet another military factory, or even several military factories, and not just with a single missile, meaning it will simply be blown to smithereens, is just a matter of time. It's simply a matter of time. And this isn't even ballistic missiles yet. And the same goes for the air raid alerts. I think you've seen and heard many times that they deliberately, in Russia, they don't turn them on so as not to cause panic. Well, why would they? So even if Russians find out that a Flamingo or a Neptune or a Ukrainian ballistic missile is headed your way, it will be without any warning. It'll be after the fact, as they say. If any of you, if Russians or their relatives are watching me, if someone you know or someone close to you works at a similar factory, there's a high probability they are done for. Well, in the near or foreseeable future. By the way, friends, in every episode we have an important fundraiser for the Ukrainian Defense Forces, who are performing real feats right now. Not only are they holding back the massive Russian army, but they're also reclaiming our Ukrainian territories. Today, we are continuing to raise funds for mobile command posts for our air defense fighters, for those who shoot down Russian missiles and Russian Shaheds, for several air defense units, and the 152nd Jaeger Brigade. The fighters have recorded a video message for you. Please take a look.
152 бригада і підрозділ повітряних сил України та канал Бориса Тізенгаузена починають збір на 2 командні пункти, щоб збивати шахеди над нашими містами і запускати дрони-перехоплювачі. Сума чимала, але тільки разом ми можемо дати ворогу по зубам.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Let's help our defenders. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There are options for Mono, Privat, and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. If you're watching on another channel, the QR code also always leads to the fundraiser. I recently visited one of the air defense units. I was simply amazed just how professional and how well our soldiers know their job. And in general, these are real tough guys. Let's step up our efforts. They really need our help. More command posts. Greater effectiveness in protecting our skies, and protecting us as well. I think you've heard about the destruction of the Russian convoy of 50 trucks near the bridge in Armyansk. Now that's impressive. This is a photo, as they say, through the eyes of a Ukrainian drone. You know what's wonderful here? That the armed forces of Ukraine essentially created this trap for the Russians themselves. They lured them in there. After a series of strikes on the Chonhar Bridge, the Russian army They were forced to urgently change the supply routes to Crimea and their southern grouping and began to massively transfer military cargo through Armyansk, since the Chonhar crossing had suffered critical damage. They've now set up a pontoon crossing there, but that's only temporary as well. The crossing in Nizhnekamsk was also destroyed, and so the occupiers' convoy set off through Armyansk. Well, that's exactly where our forces were waiting for them. It was on this route that the strike was delivered. In other words, they caught this group very, very tightly and effectively. Right now, the loss of fuel trucks, tankers, and even just regular trucks is especially painful for the Russian army. So how are they supposed to transport the fuel? Even if they have the fuel, well, you can't just pour it into the back of a Ural truck. So these tankers are exactly what's needed. And here's the footage. When they destroyed that convoy, you know, it reminded me of something. I think it reminded you too. Of the first days of the full-scale invasion when the Russians rushed toward Kiev in convoys and were taken apart on the highways. Remember, there were entire stretches of highway near Brovary and here on the Zhytomyr highway, not far from us, where dozens of burned-out pieces of Russian equipment stood for a long time. By the way, they really did just stand there. So realizing that logistics in the south were a big problem, the Russians decided to try to outsmart us. Our drone operators, that is. Let's take a look at a video filmed in Kerch in occupied Crimea, showing how the Russians decided to camouflage their military fuel trucks. Take a look.
Вова, сейчас будет эксклюзивная вещь. Обогнала, вот сейчас стою и показываю тебе. Едет бензовоз. Вот смотри, вон он. Смотри, что они сделали. Вот он, красавчик. Смотри, как они его, бля, замаскировали. Военный бензовоз. Смотри. Вот он. Вот.
Obviously, this won't fool us, but Russian truck drivers who are transporting something to Crimea can send their regards to the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, which has now made all trucks a completely legitimate target. But I don't think this will save them in any way. After all, Putin once said that you should use civilians as cover. That's their tactic, the tactic of the world's second army. By the way, have you noticed that no one calls the Russian army the world's second army anymore? Even the Russians themselves don't call it that. Well, I have another great video about Russian military equipment on occupied territory, which was much less fortunate. This is Donetsk and the outskirts of Donetsk. Operators from the 41st Pilum Unmanned Systems Regiment of the Azov 1st Corps keep the enemy's logistical routes in Donetsk and its surroundings under fire control. Let's watch this video to see how our drones destroy Russian military equipment.
Повітряна тривога, лети до Таганрога, дістань до Волгограда, Саратов потруси, нехай гримить в Тамбові, Рязані та Ростові, як до Москви дістанешся, то нахуй рознеси. Дехто каже, що це гріх і так не треба, гнів та розпач можуть карму зіпсувать. Бачу сльози, чути стогін аж до неба. За це все капи мають поздихать. Повітряна тривога, лети до Таганрога, влупи як слід Вороніж і Курском закоси. Є Лабугу поштрикай, Новгород великий, як до Москви дістанешся, то
To be continued. Beautiful. And that's just the operators from a single regiment, the 41st, at work. Can you imagine how much Russian equipment is being destroyed by all the units? Apparently, in light of this news, Medvedev started an early drinking binge even before the celebration of Russia Day began. He published a video in which he sends portraits of German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Ursula von der Leyen through a shredder, and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. So, he generated a video, and in this way Medvedev congratulated Russians on Russia Day. The semi-liquid Terminator got his hands on an AI image generator. Now that's it, just everything. Now he'll pour himself another drink and make videos of himself defeating the whole world, the galaxy. So get ready. The alco-hobbit is on the loose. Meanwhile, in Russia, the shortage of gasoline and diesel fuel has already reached Siberia and now affects 25 regions. Help! Look at what these terrible Ukro-Saxons and Anglo-Saxons are doing. On Russian propaganda shows, they're now saying with renewed vigor that it's not Ukraine's fault, it's all the United Kingdom. Amazing, isn't it? Our drones, our operators who are simply unmatched. And in the end, all the credit goes to the United Kingdom. It seems kind of unfair, don't you think? And we haven't mentioned Donald Trump in a while, but it looks like he's just ended another war. US President Donald Trump claims that the United States has ended the war with Iran. According to him, Tehran has finally agreed never to possess nuclear weapons. CNN reports this. Let me quote Trump himself. I don't know if you've heard yet, but today we ended the war with Iran, and they agreed never to possess nuclear weapons. Iran has not yet confirmed this information. And, true to form, CNN published a video compilation where Donald Trump said 39 times that he was already close to making a deal with Iran. But there is a nuance after all. The terms of this deal have leaked online, and I think that for many, they won't like them. Everyone except Iran, to be precise, may not like them. So look, the US will be rebuilding Iran for $300 billion. This is the headline published by the Iranian agency MEHR, which also released the draft agreement between the US and Iran. So what's in these points? A complete cessation of war on all fronts, lifting of the naval blockade within 30 days, and withdrawal of American troops from territories adjacent to Iran, to Iranian territories. That's something. Resumption of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days according to Iranian agreements. Suspension of sanctions and full access for Iran to its frozen assets. Assistance to Tehran in the amount of $300 billion from the US and its allies. The allies will pay as well. The start of 60-day negotiations on nuclear issues and the complete lifting of sanctions. And during the negotiations, the US must unblock them. Immediately, 24 billion of Iran's assets will be released, with half of that even before the negotiations begin. What a deal for Iran, as sanctions will be lifted. Iran will charge a fee for passage through the Hormuz Strait. Iran's assets in the US will be unfrozen, and at their own expense and that of their allies, they will restore Iran. In return, Iran will promise not to possess nuclear weapons. I don't know who, besides Trump himself, called Trump a brilliant businessman, but here it's clearly Iran that's profiting. Well, you know, what's important for us in this story? If sanctions are lifted from Iranian oil, it will be a powerful blow to Russian oil. Legal Iranian oil, no longer under sanctions, will flood the market. And of course, it will compete with Russian oil. That's a big plus. And here's an update, by the way. The official representative of Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that the key provisions have been agreed upon, but not all. That's the news for today. Friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and don't forget. And let's help our warriors from the Air Defense Forces. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, and glory to Ukraine.